Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. This is our 34th Dialogic Pedagogy podcast. And our topic today is education for knowledge versus education for agency. And so far, we are here, Anna Marjanovic-Shane, Eugene Matusov, Ray Symonds, and we expect some other people to join us on the way. So let's start right away with the discussing. First of all, I'd like Eugene to ask you, what do you mean by agency yourself? Because I think that there are different ways that people define agency, and it would be maybe good to start with that.
Actually, maybe I should return it back to you, Anna, since you introduced this topic. Like, what do you mean by the whole question? And you know, the Russian initiative is punishable. So
yes. Well, the initiative on asking question is to ask the question, and I did that.
Well, you know,
also have to answer. But okay, so I think that the based on various articles in the literature that we read and on our articles that we wrote and what we did, I could say that the agency is a kind of a way of people subjectivity in motion, authorial subjectivity in motion, wanting to find something out, wanting to define yourself, wanting to explore things, wanting to act in the world in certain way. I think the word agency comes from acting, and that in education especially, that kind of acting is not a always, although it can be creating certain projects, but also acting in a world of meaning making, trying to make sense of things for yourself, for the others, about yourself, about the others, about the world. So it's not about the transmission in education. It's not about transmission of some ready-made bits of information or what's known as knowledge, what existed before, but it's about the exploring and authoring your own self and the world, finding the truth or finding the meaning and sense about the world. That's for me agency. That's what I think. So I think that these two orientations are in a way one. In education, orientation to knowledge is orientation to transmit something that's already established in the current culture, society, or education as kind of like finished and known things or opinions or moral codes or principles, values, while agency is a person's journey into the world and making sense of it. That's how I would.
No, Anna, this is not the question I asked you. You're answering the question that you asked me. But I asked you why you wanted this topic. What interested in you that topic? Like why you introduced that topic, agency and knowledge? Like what you see there as interesting for yourself, something that you find puzzling. What's puzzling for you?
Well, to me, what's puzzling, and when I introduced it was probably 2 years ago, but people voted for it now. At that time, we were working on writing some articles about agency and knowledge and education for and from agency and for knowledge. And what's fascinating to me is that education for and from agency is should not be defined solely or even primarily by the society, but by the student. And what's puzzling to me is then, not puzzling, is just to try to imagine that kind of a ramification when the student has the right to steer the ship, let's say, of her or his education. What are all the ways that what is good about it, what's bad about it, and boundaries with where the society's guidance ends or should step away or should step into that quest.
Okay, thanks. Ray, you voted for that. So what is for you?
So a lot of this has to do with my own personal circumstances. So I'm a high school teacher in South Korea, and I don't know how much you know about the Korean high school system, but it is entirely slanted, or at least in the way that I see this agency and knowledge, Korean education is totally slanted towards knowledge. Everything is about these really huge high stakes tests. And what I struggle with as a teacher in here is I'm much more interested in teaching for agency. And the students have a desire for that, but there's so much pressure to just get to the point of knowledge that while they want to sort of learn, what I see as agency, they're almost disincentivized to do it because it won't provide the results in their life that are measurable, right? Like these test scores and the college entrance don't care about their level of agency. They care about their demonstrable level of knowledge. And so it's this weird space to navigate where I want to teach this way, the students want to be taught that way, but in the end, their efforts will be better paid off if they're just focused on the knowledge aspect. And so it's an interesting, conflict to me, these two things, because of where it is that I'm trying to be an educator.
So Ray, so the question, I guess, for you, I hear the question for you is like, what to do with that situation, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working on this for a long time, and I feel like I carved out a small amount of space for myself, but I'd be really interested to see kind of how others see this, and maybe that'll give me some insight on maybe other ways to go. But it's a conflict that I kind of wrestle with every day, and so it's a concept that is intriguing to me, at least.
Okay, let's move. It looked like that Amnon didn't solve the problem with the camera, so
yeah, I will just hear you.
Okay. Let's go with the floor.
Yeah,
so,
I tried to restart, but
yeah, okay, no, not a problem. Let's leave with that. So Amnon, you also voted for this topic. So why you find that interesting? Like how you understand it, and what problems are for you? What issues for you there?
First of all, I have to understand exactly what do you mean by agent versus knowledge. What exactly do you mean to? And then I can ask the questions.
But no. But listen, something attracted you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
yeah, of course. It seems for me something between process and and outcome. So something like this. And as I understand it, that the process is much more valuable or important for us than the content knowledge, for example. If we are talking about skills versus or capacities versus just content knowledge. So this is interesting because I think it's a very important issue that we are struggling nowadays with. Much more important for our students. Is it their skills that they have to, for me, for example, the Utagogi issue, the self-determined learning that they can determine themselves into the process of created knowledge, or that, and then we should leave the knowledge itself or the content itself, or just maybe to make them curious about to research things, but not just to to deliver something.
Okay. So
I don't know if this is a direction. That's my interest.
No, that's what we're about. We to explore our interest, not somebody else's interest. Our interest.
Okay, no, but you I didn't hear you because I was busy with my computer. I didn't hear the opening of your conversation. Maybe you present some of your intentions. So I couldn't hear about it.
Yeah. Eugene just asked me, because I'm the sponsor of the topic, what intrigues me in this topic, and why did I sponsor it. So that's the direction. So we're just finding out what's intriguing to us in thinking about this. Like, what are the puzzlements that we have?
What do you mean by the term agent, or what is the term agent for you? What do you mean by the term agent?
And you meaning who?
And you mean who? Yeah. Who is the agent, and what does it mean to be an agent of yourself or for others?
To me, it's let me answer. To me, the agency or being an agent means that you own a certain quest, that you first of all interested in that. Second, that you can direct yourself in the sense that you can decide when, what, why, how, and everything in your educational journey. That for me means agency.
Well, so it's very fit my my interesting in Utagugi, the self-determined learning.
Yeah. It's a very unusual term.
Yeah, I know.
One thing that I feel that there is, like listening to you all, I think one big tension exists in education is what I think is what I call intrinsic education versus instrumental education. And instrumental education is something that's serving to some other areas of life, like economy, democracy, I don't know, social justice, coherence in society, whatever, health, and so on and so forth, which is currently dominate education. If you, like, people ask, like, why education? People immediately start giving, oh, because it's important for economy, or it's important for like democracy, or it's important for getting ahead in the life, like in the sense of the social mobility, and so on and so forth. But education also, from intrinsic point of view, education is important part of the existential part of the life. It's important just because it's important. It makes our life kind of good. That's why it's the same thing is about art. Like, it's interesting. I have some students who are going to be teachers, and they want to be art teachers, and ask them, like, I don't know how it's in other countries, but in the United States, when there is a problem in economy, the first thing in education to go, it's art education. They cut art education. So I ask, like, my students, how you will advocate for art education? And they predictably, I know that in the United States, predictably will say, art is very important because it can increase math test scores. That's why art education is important. And I ask usually, raise your hand if you listen music, you like to dance, sing, watch movies, read books, because you want to increase your math test scores. Of course, nobody raising hand, which just makes this kind of claim. I don't know is it true or not that education can increase math test scores, but it makes the claim absurd. Because people engage in art mostly for many different reasons, but mostly for intrinsic reasons. It's much clearer with the arts than with education. But unfortunately, our life right now is such that doesn't allow education
for its own sake.
Yes, for its own sake, to be a part, to release it to as a part of the life. Nevertheless, this void exists in people. And I have empirical evidence for that. I did research on that, and I found that it's in three different cultures, it's omnipresent, this void for intrinsic education. So now what's interesting is that this instrumental education represented by knowledge, by the notion of the knowledge. It's very interesting if you think about that. And intrinsic education start getting represented by the agency, by the notion of agency, which is also interesting in itself. Like why
maybe it's something that began with your body, even when we wake up in the morning, and first thing they are going into your cellular to see what happened in the world, or even in praying in the morning, the first thing they are doing in the morning. Is it begin with our body? Is that what you mean for?
I'm not so sure it's about body. I think it's something to do with our, like how our life in society organized. Like my view on that is that you know, the first smart machines were human, not machines. Like pyramids mostly built by not machines, by humans, working as machines. Like that marvelous walls of the Jerusalem, mostly built by humans as working as machines, smart machines. Not so. This idea of like making machines out of humans is represented by the knowledge. What does it mean, knowledge, in this case? Knowledge is something that you can separate from yourself and give it to some other person. And that person will kind of, through the knowledge, can replace you. Like, you know, this testing on in school, this is back to Ray, to your concern. Like, you know, there are like math tests, 2 + 3 = what? 5. And doesn't matter who will answer the question correctly. People in this case replaceable, and they can be replaced by calculator actually. At the final analysis, they can be replaced by the real machine. Humans don't need to be there. So the whole school is like shape people so they become predictable, replaceable, and this is what done through the knowledge. And the knowledge is kind of as a separation, like it's kind of the idea of knowledge is exactly to kill agency. You don't need agency anymore. You don't need to have a art of adding numbers, 2 + 3. No, there is a predictable way of doing that, which is done through the knowledge. And you can have conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge, whatever, but the idea is that it can be separated from the humans, and through that make humans replaceable, make them become part of this machinery. And unfortunately, it's kind of needed because we live in a society where still smart machines are fortunately not yet becoming as smart as people, but it's coming closer and closer and closer to that. Yeah.
Can I just interject? Even where smart machines are very available, like calculators or basic calculators that not talk some remote part of the world, but United States, let's say, or Europe, they would not be allowed. So it's a I think you're right, because the education is to make the child or the person memorize this process rather than use a machine that already exists. So it's about shaping somebody's brain to work like a machine. Not brain, but their way of existing, because that's a puzzling thing. Like even where we have the smart machines, education resists using them.
Yes, but in my view, it's because it's serving some other sort of other fields as well. Besides making people like machines, also it's arranging or stratifying people, and it's also become a part of capital. And where are you in that social pecking order, in a way? But it's much more complication that it's just serving to make people like machines. It has other functions as well, but this is all of them instrumental functions.
Mhm.
And that's why there is a huge resistance for the education to make to allow students to use calculators. I remember when computers emerged. Ray, I don't know if you lived through that. Or many teachers refuse students to type their essay on the computer. You have to write it by hand.
Even with the typewriter, you had to write it by hand.
Yeah, because it's considered to be. It's interesting how they kind of create a lot of bizarre reasons why it's important to do that.
Well, there's, then they find theories like a connection between brain and hand. You will
Hands, yeah.
think better if your hand is trained to write by hand.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but part of that, in my view, it has to do with, and this is, I really respect Pierre Bourdieu about this capital theory in education. That is, education in part creates this capitals in order for stratification. Like part of this capital was studying Greek or Latin, and because it creates certain capital in the people. And why to do that? Just for the sake it makes its life difficult, which requires resources to put there to master that, and which means people with resources will have higher probability to achieve that, so they can pass it to their children.
Right, but that education got that role in the society. It was not always and in all eras where the education was the sorting system, but some other mechanism, because most people were not required to go to school. Schools were not mass schooling systems. So there were some other ways that people were sorted, either by the family in which they are born, so they are born as a slave or an aristocrat or something, or by some kind of force or cunning or something.
Yeah, but we're talking about modern times when education, or in the time when schooling especially becomes a very important part of the life.
Right. So in that sense, the mass schooling became important when it was demanded by the governments, by the society, and from that point on, it always was instrumental because it was made to serve not the student but the society.
So Eugene, what is the question?
Well, the one question that I think Ray raised, what to do under the circumstances, and I think that's a very so one possibility: patiently wait until we have so many robots that there will be no need in the humans to be like to act like smart machines. Under these conditions, current education will collapse. Just because economy will require fewer and fewer people who work as smart machines. Right now, it's predominantly requires people to working as smart machines. But there is some expectation that the process is already started. Some people say we're already in the beginning of this global technological unemployment, and under which that will lead to the crisis of the educational crisis. We just need patiently to wait. But I suspect that Ray, as a high school teacher, doesn't have this patience. And
So one of the things that I don't, and at least this is grounded in where I'm teaching, which is a very different circumstance than a lot of places. But to me, this idea of education sort of shifting that direction, I don't know that in Korea that's really possible or conceivable, because the teachers that are teaching are just doing what they were taught. And there's no, it's really, really hard to affect any kind of change as a teacher, because there's such an expectation you're going to teach what it was that you were taught, and then your students will become the next generation of teachers that will have learned that that's what's to happen. And so even as technology is increasing and students, I mean, so the amount of technology that's in my classroom, I actually find it really impeding. Like the students are so focused on accessing the technology that they're not focusing on, you know, whatever the lesson is. So it almost seems like it might be nice if we can get the smart machines to become the tools that do the instrumental part, and we're able to focus on the other part. But from my experience in Korea, the sort of forces in charge are just going to use the technology to make it harder to score the students. I don't know. I don't know if that totally connected, but anyway, that's just the things that are on top of my head.
Ray, I'm not talking about technology. I'm talking about the purpose of that technology. It's not about in technology. It's about in its purpose. The purpose right now, again, right now, education is serving mainly to prepare humans to be machines, and not only. There is many other things going on together with that. And technology sounds like, there is a lot of people claiming that, but starting back to even Aristotle suggested that at some point that machines will replace slaves. But the question is like, if we're coming to that time, then it will create a crisis in conventional education. But right now, it actually creates almost opposite effect because it creates, and it's expected to some degree, because if we are in the beginning of this process, the competition for shrinking jobs will increase, not decrease.
Yeah.
So in a way, the collapse, in a way, if you think about this educational system, will happen not through like slowly gradual decrease of the tension. The tensions for basically increase, not decrease. That's what I expect. And this is what we're seeing now.
I think
are more anxious, right, for their children, for the sake of the children. And they start demanding even more severe competition, even more severe instrumentalization of education. There is kind of, they don't feel there is any leeway left. So, and right, this is what something, I'm not talking about technology in classroom, but this has nothing to do with that. So the question is again, what we teachers can do, not on the big schema things, maybe necessarily, but specifically in our classrooms. This is what I could hear your big concern, right?
I want to keep going with your idea, Eugene, about what happened with the society or technology society when people, I know there is experience, I think, in the Scandinavian, some of the Scandinavian country with when people are encouraged to stay home and they are getting some amount of money from the government because they're encouraged to start to do things that they really want to do, like art, like maybe traveling, maybe all the things that are not instrumental for them. Just, you know, what you are talking about all the time about leisure or education or learning like leisure. And I think this is the direction. Maybe we have to think about it in our education, that we have to begin to understand that we need to get rid of the instrumental way of learning, to encourage people to develop their dispositions, their maybe you know, more spiritual or tendency or idea, more arts, for example. Okay, that's maybe this is the direction that we should be more attention to our tendency, to our dispositions, to our willingness, to what we are really want to do in the world in order to express our capabilities. And maybe this should be the direction.
Yeah, well, there are some interesting events even in the United States. I don't know how much you follow politics in the United States, but
we have our trouble. Thank you.
Right, right. I know, but
no, it's connect.
Yeah. But if you see like presidential campaign right now, there were initially 25 Democratic candidates.
Yeah.
Out of this 24, there is only one who proposed something that that actually are trying to address what we're discussing right now. Not in education. In education, his program is rather weak. But in kind of economic, he proposing universal basic income, and he's completely non-politician. And when I saw him first time in debate, he was so weak, as he doesn't have politician skills. Nevertheless, right now in the rating, he is right now the 5th out of 24. Some people start dropping. I actually expect that the first person who drop from the race will be him. Nope, he start getting traction, despite the fact that he doesn't have much skills of politician skills.
He's learning. He's learning.
Yeah, I'm talking about Andrew Young. Just like
I heard about him.
I didn't expect that, or like because I was thinking that he don't have any chances to even come close to the 10, but now he's 5th. Anyway, but still, I think the most interesting part of the like it's foray. Like he cannot move himself to Finland, I guess. That's why another possibility, Ray, for you. Go to Finland. It will be a little bit less oppressive.
Sure.
But I think that Ray had a very complex, actually, question that goes on several levels. One of them is how is it possible to change education? And I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the things that's a big obstacle is what people's embodied mission as a teacher is not even taught through, that what we learned as children about what a teacher is kind of like dominates us when we become the teacher, whether we are thinking through it or not. Even when we trying not to be the technological teacher, there are levels of like who is in power, who has the right to design the classroom. Even if you didn't have any pressure from the government, but just, let's say, classroom in itself, or school in itself, where you as a teacher could decide everything. Many teachers would still go for technological because there are many reasons. For instance, either that I have to prepare you for life, where you will be able to know and to do and have certain skills, and this belief is very, very strong in many people. And I think that it has very good concerns. For instance, I just want to challenge a little bit. As a culture, many things that we are producing or making or creating are not connected to on a scale of one person's life. So we don't reinvent the whole world in every generation, but we do transmit in certain ways some lores and some knowledge that is decontextualized. It exists there and it has its value and purpose. Or when you said, Amnon, I was thinking, if everything would be just on the interest of the students, who will be the next generation of surgeons or of maybe we don't need them. That's another thing. But if we do, we need to have people who know certain things in a certain way that guarantees that they will not experiment at the time when they are doing that job. So there is a strong need in the society, and that's need-based, it's true, to transmit what we already have achieved as a culture. And so I think it's in some way legitimate, whether it should be done in schools or as a part of school or only for people who want that, that's a different thing. I think it has its place. But now it's so predominant that it does not leave any space for the intrinsic education. And that's, I think, that changing these boundaries are somehow very hard. One is that intrinsic, not intrinsic, the embodied understanding of what the teacher is. I say embodied because it sort of comes as, like we don't even know where it comes from. Another one is, of course, on the level of educational theory, and then word escapes me, politics, and what people would then just like really try to change in a way that, for instance, let's say we can't have more than hour of drilling a day. Everything else should be electives or something like that, you know. So that would be on the level of the policies.
So you're trying to find the balance.
I would even not say balance, but I would say a polyphony of different ways of educating.
By the way, don't call it polyphony, Anna. It's not polyphony. It's not balance either, but it's not polyphony. I would say it's kind of hybrid, which is not
hybrid. Yes, right.
Because they're not addressing each other whatsoever. They just coexist, and it's not any coexistence. It's polyphony.
Right.
But I think you're right about very important things. It's kind of we colonized by instrumental education, and we colonized rather deeply that it takes many kind of layers to peel out before we start seeing how much we colonize. Like, for example, Ray, I could hear that notion lesson. Why is it lesson? Why is it education has to be lessonized? You see, all this.
What lesson do you have from the lesson?
All this language comes from the very particular vision of education, and like what Bakhtin would talk about chronotop. In my view, the chronotop of the conventional education is assignment. Everything is assigned to the students. The whole life is assigned. And by the way, assignment, when it's not self-assignment, but somebody else assignment, makes very small possibility for agency. Because the assignment, it means that somebody else can judge what's something good and what's not good, which is, in my view, the core of agency. I'm a little bit disagree with how Anna discussed agency. Because for me, it's not so much about ownership, but it's about transcendence of the given. That's why it's about something new. And by given, I mean culturally given, socially given, even biologically given. Where, for example, we are not biologically equipped to fly, but whether or not, but we learn how to transcend that, and we're flying now. All of this, and this is not just a transcendence also recognized by other people, but this is about transcendence, in my view. This authorship, it's about authorship. You're authoring something new, and it's always new. It's part of this newness. It's about exactly level of values. Is it good new, bad new, and so on and so forth. You're creating not only things, but you're creating people as well who would some way appreciate or evaluate that and recognize that it's newness of that. Let me give the example. Like a good writer, like for example, Dostoevsky. This is coming from Russia. Dostoevsky, I love Dostoevsky. He's not only create a new type of novel, which is Bakhtin called polyphonic novel, but he creates a new type of the readers who start appreciating that with this.
Are you talking about curiosity, for example? I mean, people have to develop their curiosity about the world by. Then this may be not the state now for the not just appreciate things, but to be curious for discovering things, for learning things, and maybe this is the education we are looking for. That maybe I know where. Maybe you heard about Jakutot of NCR, the teacher.
Yeah,
you heard about him, and his conclusion were that the teacher shouldn't teach what he know. He have to teach what he doesn't know, in order to give a place for a real dialogue between him and the students, and from this point. Without authorship, to start learning things, to start with their curiosity to learn things, or their motivation or internal motivation to learn things.
Yeah. But one of the dangers in this kind of endeavors that I would kind of recognized more and more, especially in me, maybe you don't guys immune from that, but I was definitely not immune. It's a danger of progressive education. Because, and I think I recently came to conclusion that conventional education heavily based on progressive education. Progressive education creates hegemony for, in a way. Although progressive education is not so widespread as a practice, it's tremendously widespread as hegemony because it provides easy answer to Ray. And its answer is like this. It's Jerome Bruner, who is a very famous psychologist, American psychologist, well, an educator. And he's very much formulated, in my view, one of the kind of cornerstone of progressive education, which I called progressive education is opium of educators. And it sounds like that. Any subject can be taught any student at any time in some honest way. He has several formulations, but this is one of them.
You have to write. You just have to find the right key.
You need to find the right key. So for the Ray, okay, you are in this situation. You have student who forced to learn whatever your subject is. It English? Probably.
It's English.
Yeah. So whether or not they want to learn English or not, it doesn't matter. From progressive point of view, it's always Ray. It's possible to find way to each student how they, in authentic way, to learn English. And it's always possible. It's your job, Ray, to find the magic key to each student, to open the door from them. And this is what I call opium of educators. Because if you think from, it's basically saying that instrumental education can be possible to do in very authentic way with any student in any subject. So for example, if you switch Ray to teaching students quantum mechanics, it's it's also possible to do that. You just need to find some kind of key for the heart and mind of each student.
But what's hidden, what I see as a hidden premise of that is two things. One is that education is the responsibility of the educator, and the educator solely has to make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, it's the blame on educator. Or if it doesn't happen the way how it's visible for the through measurements, whatever. But another one is, so that's one thing. And another one just slips me now, okay.
Okay, let me add another one, and I don't know is it what you meant or not, is that curriculum is controlled by the society, and it's non-negotiable.
Okay, that's another one. And the third one is that student, in a way, is still the object of the pedagogical action, because the responsibility and the agency is on the educator, not on the student. And so you just.
What do you think about it?
Froze.
So
in a way, yeah.
You described the situation, but what is your opinion about it?
Yeah, well, that is
about the responsibility issue.
I think that the responsibility for education should be part of the, not part, it should be the students' responsibility, in the sense that they should have a right to take that responsibility or to leave that responsibility, to say, I do want to learn this or I don't want to learn that, and then stand behind that. So that I'm talking constantly about ownership as part of the agency. So the student is in charge and therefore also takes the responsibility. I think the responsibility of the educator is to be a guide, to be in the service of the student, and not to treat the student as an object. So in a way, if the students does not respond the way how an educator thinks they should, it's not a failure of education. It should be a legitimate part of the students search for what they searching for or not.
And who is responsible on the curriculum?
The student, I think the curriculum is something that should happen and evolve, and so that you can't say responsibility, because in a way you predict that there should be some curriculum that's predictable in some way. I think the curriculum that evolves could be guided and directed by the student, but evolves in a complex way of situation of all kinds of things that happen around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you know what, Ray? Let me, because I still, I'm teaching myself, and it's very, I think almost any teacher, unless you're an institution of democratic school, although even there, I would argue the problem is what you describe is there as well. The many democratic educators who working in democratic schools, I'm not completely aware that the problem that Ray, you dealing with, or I'm dealing with, that it's common. It just happened in different ways, and it's much less visible in democratic schools than it is in our situations. And again, I'm not saying that my situation, Ray, in any way the same as yours, although I was teaching in Soviet Union as a physics in high school as well, and the situation was somewhat similar, but not exactly this. I think it's much worse situation that what I hear from you, that I was in Soviet Union teaching physics. I was teaching physics. But let me tell what I'm doing now in my situation, and I'm sharing it with you not because I suggest you to copy it. I think it's impossible for many reasons. But just maybe to engage to discussion, maybe what you're doing in that sense. So I'm teaching at the University of Delaware, and I teach pre-service teachers and graduate students who are going to be, most of whom are going to be educational researchers. So my current solution of this problem that Ray, you presented, is to create something what I call multiple pedagogical regimes in my class. So far, right now, I have 4 regimes, but maybe they will be more in the future. But right now, I have 4. One of them I called, or with my colleagues, we called that, because that term emerged, I don't know, 7 years ago, open syllabus, in which students develop their own syllabus. What they want to study, how they want to study, do they want to come to class or not to want to class, and how to, like I needed grade because that my conditions of my work, but fortunately for me, nobody tells me how to get grades because, you know, for private. So they can put, for example, unconditional A, or to do something else, it's up to them. And they develop that, and I'm helping them to do that sometimes, those who needs help. Also, they see it happens through the web, so they can see how other people developing that. Okay, so there is some kind of guidance, and some students do it together sometimes, collective open syllabus. So that's one possibility. Another possibility, what I call it opening syllabus, which means some, by the way, that's the first possibility is, in my observation, it's mostly for students who either autodidact or, and they want to be learners. In a way, it's not, they really want to deconstruct things. They want to know how they work. Or there are another group of people that I think it become clear for me that's interested in open syllabus, who actually, for whom this, whatever subject matter that we're learning is rather peripheral. So they want to stay on the periphery, and they want to define what does it mean for them, that periphery. They don't want to do too much, but nevertheless they want to try, because it sounds like interesting maybe. So the second type is something what I called other. So the first people I called self-responsible learners. It's autodidact or peripheral people who are responsible for designing their own education. The second group of people I called other responsible learners. They want to be learners, but for different reasons, they either don't trust themselves, or they have circumstances that don't have, they cannot involve in decision making, or some other reasons. There could be some circumstances.
I would say they sometimes people need guidance how to be autodidact.
Yeah,
They
right.
have not done that before. So they want to have certain kind of like a guide who would gently nudge them and say, now this would be good to do.
By the way, it's not gently.
Not gentle.
Some things, because there is violence in that involved.
Right.
Because
they need scaffolds.
No, it's not scaffolds. There is a violence involved because I'm designing the class initially and gradually let them to make more and more decision making. But in my design, if they accept that design, there are consequences of that design, which I hit them with the head, if they violate these consequences.
Right.
And change that consequences, true, but it's become a contract in a way that if they entering this, they kind of trust my design, unless they want to change that. But again, if they want to change it, they're responsible for changing that.
Yeah.
And for example, there are requirements there. You have to do this, this, and this. If you don't do this, this, and this, there will be negative consequences that affect your final grade. Again, unless you change these consequences or change these requirements, it's possible as well. So this is a second regime. The third regime is, interestingly enough, Ray, that's exactly students you described, some of them you described, what I call credential students. They want, they're not interested in being a learner, as in the sense of deconstructing things. They want to, it's almost like comparison to learning how to drive a car. You're not interested in how a car works, why there is such a rules, and so on and so forth. You just make sure that, you make sure that you're safe with yourself and other people, and will continue learning to become more proficient later on. So you want to be judged by the experts, recognized experts, in this case me, how well you're doing that. In this case, I develop a battery of tests. It doesn't matter how you prepare to that. You can come to class, not come to the class. I provide resources how to prepare for that test, and go ahead and do that. Now, the fourth option, probably most kind of controversial. It's something I call prisoners of education. It's people who don't want to learn anything in my class. They think this is a cruel and unusual punishment of my class. They forced by institution to take my class, and so on and so forth. This is how they feel. And in this case, it's like somebody asked me to learn, I don't know, about Bali right now. I'm nothing against learning about Bali, but this is not my life. I'm not interested right now. At least I think I'm not interested right now. And if somebody interrupt my life and say, Eugene, half your salary will depend whether or not you take these classes on Bali, dancing, I probably have to take them, but I expect to be miserable, at least for some time. Maybe somebody can make a magic, but I doubt. So in this case, I'm giving B-, which is surviving grade in University of Delaware, and goodbye.
Pass.
We will not see each other.
I think this
pass grade.
Right.
Yeah,
but don't you intend, or do you have any wish that or some direction that all of your students will become gradually to be a part of the first regime?
No, I don't. And this is what progressive education is about, to have this.
Okay.
I don't want for my students. I want them to want. I want to support their wish. Let me, by the way, Amnon, let me give strong example why it's undesirable. I give one example, which make me think about the situation very deeply. Long before I start doing what I'm described you, I was teaching. I was really heavily guided by progressive education. And I had a student, I had a very interesting class where my students on cultural diversity, where my students, mostly white middle-class Americans, worked with Latino kids. And they had practicum, going and work with the kids in after-school program. And they can do whatever they want with the kids, play, create activities, whatever they want. And I had a student who is completely disengaged, both in my class and in at the center. And I tried to do everything to engage her. Like, for example, you know, I was sending little kids who are very cute, like 7 years old, 5 years old, very cute kids, you know, the power of cuteness, to her, ask them to play with them.
Yeah.
She like pushed them back. She was either spending all the time texting on her phone or trying to distract other her peers to talk about some other stuff. So anyway, in that class, at that time, I still were doing grades and stuff like that. So in my class, it was very difficult to get it, but she got C. It was very unusual situation. I gave her C, and that was all. A year later, I bumped into her on campus. And for me, usually it's a test. If my students passed me without acknowledging me, it means nothing interesting happened. But if they just say, "Well, Eugene, blah blah blah," I think that at least something good was happened. And I absolutely expected that she will pass me without any acknowledgement, without even say hello. But she suddenly just jumped, say, "Eugene, nice to see you," blah 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 blah. And I was like thinking, maybe she confused me with somebody else, some other professor. And I just hesitated. And she picked up on that and said, "You know, Eugene, your class was the best thing that happened with me." I said, "What? My class?" That was completely, it's never happened, my class, for you. And she said, and she kind of, again, maybe read my hesitation because I was like completely disoriented. And she said, "You know, Eugene, I noticed everything. I noticed how much you tried to engage me." And then I started thinking, why the hell I don't want to be? I'm not interested in that. And I kind of realized in your class that I don't want to be teacher. I don't like to be with the kids. I don't like to teach. And after your class, I was thinking, I did a lot of soul searching, and I came to the conclusion that I want to be an artist. And I'm right now learning that. I'm so happy. And without your class, I don't think it would happen. So I thought, wow, this is, by the way, this is interesting education about agency without any knowledge. Because she didn't learn any knowledge about, like, knowledge.
But you give her the chance to learn about herself. That's what you did.
I'm not sure I gave her a chance. It just happened.
No chance, but opportunity. You enabled
it just
her,
happened.
okay?
Yeah, right.
It not just happened. It's something with your attitude that enabled her.
Maybe,
It's not by chance.
But it was not legitimate. In my understanding back then, it was not legitimate. I didn't recognize as a possibility for that. That's why I gave her C.
Okay.
I should have gave her A++. I don't know how many exclamation marks I have to give.
Next time you will give such students the A++.
Yeah. But I just want to say that I don't want her. She would refuse to be. She's like was a prisoner to some degree, but not completely, because she was testing her. Important learning for her was testing her desire to be teacher or not to be a teacher.
Okay.
And this is what's important for her. That's why I'm telling you that I don't want all students to become going to open syllabus. Not necessarily.
No, but to be more awareness to their, for example, to their wish, to their willingness, to their desires, to their values, and other things. Don't you wish them to even to get determined or to get to the decision that they don't want to do what you are, or they don't want to learn what you are teaching them, or what you are,
Imagine, I would imagine like a completely different situation in which we don't have the structure of a university or high school as we have now, where the students have to do certain things, not because it's something that guided by themselves, but okay. So in a, let's say, completely democratic environment, that student might have not even come to Eugene's class. That may or may not be good for her. Maybe sometimes this awkward situation made her realize that she doesn't want to be a teacher. But in such a democratic school, she might have realized that in any number of other places where she would be given that opportunity or be forced to do something that she doesn't want and would have a right to make her own decision. So I even think that this multi-syllabus that Eugene invented and I will try also to do is a result of a very awkward situation that we are trying to create an oasis of teaching for agency or from agency in a otherwise institution that's completely driven by technological instrumental educational philosophy and practices. So, yeah.
But don't you think that at least we have to, you know, to give for these students a chance or a opportunity again to experience something that something else that they are used to in order to find or to discover joy of learning. That's what I mean. Joy of learning. Okay, and if we enable them to feel that it's not instrumental, that they can be, and we encourage them, and we give them the trust that they are. The trust is very important thing. We give them the trust that they can do, they can decide, they can think, they can make the dialogue. Okay, it gradually they will used to be more, you know, more agents for themselves.
I think that sometimes forcing is good, but it's not educational. I would say it may result in somebody's education, but not in itself. And there is a story that also Eugene always says about his parents bribing him really to eat some food that he hated to eat in order to just give him a chance to experience a great taste that he did like. Potentially many children and students would not like in the first place. But I believe that that's where the violence is, that where you force somebody for their own good. If there is only enticement, like I'm just offering a very rich learning environment, there are various possibilities. You can do this, you can do that, you can do that, but it's completely up to you what you're doing. If people have a chance to learn things and to miss learning. That's true too, because I think one of the progressivist idea is that we shouldn't miss at all. We should provide the chance even if to force it, that missing learning is something bad. And I think in life it's just like should be legitimate to miss on learning something, because it's just like
no, I'm not talking about content. I'm talking about way of learning. Just try, okay, try, and then you can say it's not for me. Okay, something like this.
Well, that could be done if it's invitation. If it's
invitation, of course.
So, of course. So it doesn't have any consequences. If you don't try, no consequences. But if you want to say, if you don't try, there will be consequences, or you will not pass, or something like that. In that sense, then
no. Invite you to try. Invite you to try and to experience something new that you didn't experience never in your life. That is for my experience, that a lot of people changed the concepts about learning just because I enforced them, okay, to experience autonomy, okay, because I force them. There is no question if they want to take the autonomy or not taking the autonomy. I force them to take the autonomy in order to try it, okay, and then they could reflect about this, but it was the first time. Nobody never gave them such an autonomy, so they didn't know what about. They didn't know how to coping it. So it was very difficult for in the beginning, but gradually, when I make when I make the dialogue with them and help them to think about and calculate their steps, it became to be for them some meaningful experience.
Yeah, I think that in the ideal world, you would not have to force them, and the ideal by the sense that you completely legitimize the right of a student or of a person not to be engaged with certain content or certain focus in their life or certain type of learning, let's say ballet, dancing, or whatever, and that's completely legitimate. And that you can just really offer. And, you know, if something has a value, it's for the student that they didn't know about it, they may be attracted to it at some times or not. You know, we don't know.
It reminds me that sometimes in political area, that can you give the opportunity to the people to decide that they don't want a democratic?
Yes, actually.
Yes.
That's very hard to, but
okay.
Right?
Okay.
By the way, this is actually happened in my classes, that some students don't want to be democratic, and some of that they want to go to these different options, that because the class by default focusing on the second option, which is interestingly enough opening syllabus.
Yeah,
and
contract.
But sometimes in my graduate classes, like last class, everybody choose open syllabus.
Yeah.
In my undergraduate classes, majority choose opening syllabus.
Yeah.
In graduate classes, different. It can go a different way. It depends. If I have students from a lot of students who took my class several times, then they trying to convince. This is actually I expect there will be happen on Wednesday, and I will try to argue against that. By the way, against novice people jumping immediately on open syllabus just because old-timers think that it's a good idea, because they don't realize that that pathway is also important. And shortcuts, not necessarily good things in education, to have the shortcuts. But students like, I have students who said, I don't want to make decision-making about education. Do it for me. Okay, I will do it. That's fine. Like be dictator of my education. Okay, I will be dictator of education, but they wanted me to do that. It's very explicit.
Also,
it's very comfort that you will make the decision for them. Don't you want them to try to exercise or to just begin with develop the skill of taking decision for themselves? Maybe what are the reasons? What are the reasons? What are the reasons? We have to understand the reasons why they're acting like this. It's important for us, the reasons. It's not just the outcomes of it. It's the reason why they're doing like this.
Yeah, we're different because I'm taking position that I'm a servant of the student. I'm doing what they ask me to do. I might share my ideas about that, but at the end of the day, they make decision themselves. Whether or not I agree with that decision or not agree with the decision, it's their decision.
Okay, it's their decision, but
that's why I don't want to say what I want. What I want is not important.
But you argue with them. You're doing something. You just
I
just don't accept it. At the end of the process, they decide for themselves. But first, you are trying to convince them what are the prices, what are the implications for their actions of their decisions.
No, I'm not trying to convince them. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to really help them to explore their own desires. Is it really their desire, or they colonized by desire that they actually would not find there? In many ways, like for example, I was colonized by the progressive education, and I then realized that it's bad desire. Even now, I know that it's bad desire, but it's part of my body almost. I want, I want to engage all my students in my classes. And I know how bad it is, this idea. But nevertheless, I wanted, it's just like so difficult to shake it off from me. The same thing for the students. They sometimes, it's not their desire. And then suddenly realize, wow, actually I don't want that. It may be difficult not to want that, but they don't want that. And I help them to, on the other hand, maybe they want that. Maybe this is them. That's why I'm not trying to persuade them, do this or do that. No, I'm just bringing alternatives and consider, do you really want that? There will be such and such things. Maybe look at this alternative. Maybe you like that, because you might not even know that the alternative existed. That's why you think that is natural, which is maybe not natural at all. But at the end of the day, they say, no, well, I want that. Okay.
And in all of that, for many students, the concerns come exactly what Ray was talking, that maybe they want something, but they are scared that if they let themselves work on their wishes and desires, they will fail on a large scale for the getting a good grade or whatever, becoming in the society something that they need to. So they have conflicts too, and it's very very good actually. I think that's part of the education for them to start to explore all these their own conflicts, and then even if they say, well, I'm failing myself, but I have to do that. That's it.
In my case, one of the things that's really important, and trying to get at what the students want is really, really difficult, because the students don't have the idea that they can want something other than just what I'm providing.
Yeah.
And so if I give them the choice, tell me what you want, they're sort of paralyzed, because it's not even an option that they can conceive of. So I've got to try and carve some kind of space for them where here's what I'm telling you to do, because I have that authority, and in their eyes I have that responsibility. But within what I'm telling them to do, there's space for them to make some decisions and have some direction and control over, the final form of that thing. One of the things that I think Eugene was touching on that seems semi-parallel to what I'm doing, when you're talking about your 4 different learning regimes, there's kind of a sense of you're manipulating the grading system. I know that's not entirely what you're doing, but you're creating some loopholes for the grades. And in my case, that's a really, really important thing to do, because the grades are really that's the key. My school needs to know exactly how I'm grading them. There can be no subjectivity. It's really, really oppressive. And so what I found that has given me some success is when I can create a space where the product of whatever it is they're working on is not the thing that's graded. That's where they can start to feel free to explore. Because when the product, if there's a project or a presentation, if I'm grading that thing, they will do it exactly as the rubric says it should be done. But if I say there's no grade on that, there's grade on some other, related things, the final product has a whole lot more range of expression. And that's where I find some success, right? So if I can take the pressure of those grades off of the product, they're freer to try new things and to explore it on their own terms. And then I just have to put those grades somewhere else. But sometimes shifting around grades is where I can find the space that I can teach the way I want.
So the problem is the grades. The problem is the grades.
Let me tell, because I struggle with that as well. Let me provide kind of what I came right now, because that's interesting for me. Maybe you have different different ideas about that, because in my this is hurts me my heart the most, which is when I doing that in the opening syllabus. We have something that I assign a main learning project, which they do throughout the class. Sometimes it's up to them. But that's at the end. Again, those who decide to do that. And it is graded. And of course, I don't have any rubrics, whatever. So the way how I design right now, which is very interesting, they first of all, they should submit 2 drafts, one kind of working draft and final draft. And on working draft and final draft, they need to select who is going to provide feedback. On the final draft, who is going to grade them. And it could be several possibilities. One absolutely must possibility in both cases, they should do it themselves. They should evaluate themselves, provide feedback to themselves for feedback, and choose somebody else who provide feedback. It could be me or their peers, or both me and the peers. And on the grade, they should do the same thing. They should grade themselves with justification, quick justification, and it should be done by the peers or by me or all together. When there is discrepancy in the grade, they can choose any grade on this continuum between maximum grade that somebody gave to them or minimum grade that they gave them. So this is an other part of the final grade based on their just surveillance on their participation, according to my requirements. Again, we're talking about opening syllabus, which also can sometimes change by the students as well, because remember the class started with mine, but they actually can make any decision. By the way, they can eliminate grade as well. They never done that, although discussion of that happened, but they never done that so far. Anyway, this is what I'm doing. I don't know what By the way, if any of them ask me for rubrics, I will provide them with explanation why I think rubrics are bad. And they can reject that rubric themselves, or change that, or modify that, or whatever they want to do with that.
But also, there is a possibility in the middle of semester, usually, since I also worked on opening syllabus a lot, a town hall meeting. So one class dedicated, or part of the class, on just how the semester is going, what they like, what they don't like, and what they would want to change and why. So there is this reflexive class, because it's a whole new way to do education. And also, so the great place to reflect and to provide the real opportunity to change things.
Go ahead. No, Ray. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, so like I love all these ideas, and it's a really, really interesting challenge because I think what you guys are doing are, in my mind, like from where I am, that's an ideal that I need to work towards. And you know, my position, I'm a foreign teacher, so I'm like the lowest power level within the school, right? And there's some freedom in that, because as the foreign teacher, I'm kind of allowed to do my own thing, but there are these strict restrictions on what I can do. And so I think what I'm getting out of this whole meeting is sort of exactly what I was looking for. Some ideas of things to work for, and some elements that I can try and pull in. You know, the interesting challenge, which is great sometimes and like miserably frustrating other times, is trying to find that space within the confines of that I have to work in, because I can't, you know, I can't change the Korean school system by myself tomorrow. So it is what it is. How do I, you know, sort of nudge a little bit here and kind of make that space? So it's been great to get all these ideas and hear this.
Ray, one thing, especially in the English and writing, that's happened, and again, it's not by design. It was not my goal whatsoever. It just emerged, and I want to share with you as an English teacher. I have something from a long time ago. I started using webs, online kind of forums back in '96, my first time, when it was, I designed everything myself, because I used to be a computer programmer, so I was trying to do that. So anyway, one thing that it's creation of the web talk. I call it web talk, not even forum, where students can, the design is very interesting. I told them they have to post one posting a week. It could be reply, it could be initiation new topic, and it should be broadly related to the class. I never defined what does it mean to it. And I right now sitting on my hands because I try not to reply my students right now for a week or maybe two. So they will learn themselves because they don't know what does it mean to participate in that. Also, I gave them completely counterintuitive guidelines. Like one immediate question comes, how long it should be. And I'm trying to tell them that it should be as short as possible. If you can do it in one word, please do it in one word, because we're lazy, we don't have much time to read. On another hand, I told them, please do not apologize if you write alone, because if people don't want to read, they will skip that, or they will read a little bit and then stop doing that. I'm telling you what's interesting happened in many classes, not all classes, students notice how much they write. And they start discussing that I should make this class writing intensive, because they write a lot. Not everyone, but on average, there is quite a bit of the students. Sometimes more it's happened in the class, sometimes less. Nevertheless, and it's interesting that each time when discuss that the class should be writing intensive. So I should include that in the official papers that the class writing intensive. They voted consistently not to do that, because they will spoil a joy of writing if they will know that this is class writing intensive.
Yeah, they have to, yes.
Yeah. So in a way, they will be like almost like hovering for them. Oh, we need to write more.
Right.
And also they always shocked how much they write. Like one student actually put together all writing and came to this like more than 30 pages single spaced writing. What's happened? Again, some do less, some almost none at all. But that's interesting design. I never thought about that for that purpose.
To be. It's a complete freedom. They could just reply to others. They could reply just with yes or no, or they could initiate. There can be both. They can get inspired to agree, disagree, to bring new materials. It's completely open, and for that they feel total freedom, and that's great. Except that they have to post once a week. That's punished if they don't.
And if they don't, there will be punishment because. And again, the punishment is like that always. They can always recover things, but for recovering, they need to post that one plus extra one. And I told them, if you don't know what to write, BS. And they completely surprised about that. Like, why? Sure. They asked me why. And I said, well, because it's kind of in nature, like poop for one, food for another. Like maybe somebody else will find something interesting in that, or not.
Sure. I think that's an idea that I can probably adopt something like that. Like I can see ways that would be workable. So that's good.
Yeah, and when things get provoking, something it's exploding, and people start talking about that when they touch some hot issue, and then of course I'm trying to bring that back to the class if I start seeing something like that. And by the way, one interesting things developed. I once went to the conference actually in Shanghai. What was 2 years ago? There was Shanghai conference, and it's happened on Bakhtinian conference in Shanghai. Yeah, is it 3 years ago? Or 2 years ago, yes. And it's happened at the beginning of my classes. And I planned to reply my students in Shanghai, but I didn't. And suddenly, what's happened was students didn't know what to write about. So they start writing about future class. And it took me half of the semester to realize how great it was. Because in a way, by doing that, it was preparing us for the next class. Because in a way, it's focused what the class has to be. And so now I'm trying to, that's why I'm actually not planning to reply. I want to see whether or not it will emerge again, because students thinking, what the hell, I need to write something, but what it's about. So in past, it's because of probably me, the focus was mostly on the past classes. But already for 2 years, it's become on the future class as well. And it's so helpful. And the students bring a lot of their, this is where the learning activism start happening, because they bring interesting videos, articles, their personal experiences, reporting about something what other people said in their peers or
some new
families.
topics. Sometimes the question of a student or their personal interest can spark so much the whole class imagination and answers, and it's completely new topic that was not earlier.
So in this case, I'm less guessing what we should discuss in the class, because it become on the interest of at least some students at least find that interesting. I see that. And that's actually guiding me what we should discuss in the future class. So I found that web kind of things, it's really, again, sometimes it's more alive than another, and it's also sometimes it suddenly start dying at the end of the class when the students become much more anxious, and sometimes reverse.
Right. But yes, I agree with you, Ray, that we work within the confines of a very narrow-minded and different oriented educational institutions, and that single-handedly as teachers, we think powerless to change. But I think the more people try to change something, maybe at some point of time, together with the change in the economy and everything, we are maybe preparing for the future changes, So at this moment, we are being not favored much.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, right? Like, if our students can learn in this sort of other environment that maybe is brand new to them, at least that idea now exists. And when they become teachers, they'll have the idea of, oh, I can, there are other ways for me to teach.
Exactly.
They have to experience first, before they teach the students, they have to experience this kind of new environments as learners before they do something with the students. I believe that if you want to understand something, you first need to experience it as a learner. If you want to teach such a way of learning.
Amnon, I sometimes call that almost like a joke initially, but now I think more and more that's serious. I call it education for nostalgia. It's kind of the students develop nostalgia. I'm talking about my students who is going to be teachers, and they can develop nostalgia. They might not be able to do, but it's for them it becomes, wow, this is interesting. I really want to be like that, or something. I really want the idea that I want rather than what's required from me. At least the tension emerge.
And then the process of trying to deconstruct that, I liked that, how do I make that? Because that's a really valuable process to go through. I don't know what the thinking was, but I want to create something like that. Maybe if I do this, that'll work that way.
I want to tell you, Ray, about something that I'm doing with my students. It's called self-formative evaluation, which I mean when they pick a topic to learn from a general subject, they ask themselves questions such as, what will be the indication for me? What will be the indication that I really proceed a meaningful process in my learning? Or what indication will be for me that I develop a valuable knowledge for me? Okay, it's very complicated for them for the beginning, but I think it's very important because they start to think about their expectation. I mean, they directed into their expectation, and some of their evaluation is what happened in the end of the process between what I expected and what actually happened in the end of it. Maybe sometimes happened something else. It's okay. It's not must to be the same thing that I expected to, but I have some awareness or some reflective way of thinking, of looking about things. And I think the reflection is very, very important for this process.
Yeah, I agree. So when I talk about how I've taken the grade away from the project itself and put it in some other places, what I do is at the end of every project, they have to write a paper where they reflect on the process of the project. So it's not like I did this, these are the ideas I had, here's why I had them, here's how I tried to make them, have effect and then what did I learn from this, right? And so that paper gets graded, and so that's sort of where their grade comes from, because I have to give them a grade, and it has to fit within whatever parameters. But yeah, I think that emphasis on reflection is something they are not used to. Like, they've never really been asked to reflect on what they learned or reflect on their own thinking. And so I think that's a really key thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another very important question is what I learned about myself as a learner. I think such a question is very, very important. If we are aware of what we are, what our process of being a learner, it's a kind of metacognition type of view.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, yeah.
Or sometimes what questions I raised for my experience, what question for thinking I raised for my experience. I think if we are asking questions, sometimes it's raised our level of reflections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing, Ray, a little bit return back to the conversation that you have with Anna, and this is the cultural observation. And I don't know, is it relevant for you or not? And I don't know, you're in different condition a little bit. I came from Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, the kind of the way to live is to be in underground. You don't report to authorities what you're doing, because each time you will do that, you will be punished for that. But it's interesting because I'm working with my American colleagues. They always want to go and tell, oh, we're doing this and that. And I said, why you? And then, of course, very often what's happened is the institution strikes back. Because they think that it's possible to convince the institution to do that way. That is, I don't know whether you struggle with that or not, but my approach is underground. I don't get, if it's possible, as much as possible.
Yeah, no,
just your colleagues will know, and that's it.
Yeah, no, that's very similar to the way the situation is here. Like, one of the expressions I would use sometimes when I'm talking about my class is I'm trying to smuggle in creativity. Right, because if the bosses knew what I was doing, they'd put a stop to it. Yeah. Right, so I fill out the paperwork. I don't lie in the paperwork, but I don't include absolutely everything we're going to be doing.
It's a very good politics.
Sure.
Truth, but not the whole truth.
Yeah, this is what my father's lesson for me was always: say truth, only truth, but not all the truth.
You have to be very creative to what truth you chose to tell.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And plus, part of that, I personally do not believe that it's possible to so-called scale up what we're doing, exactly because our society, in my view, not ready for that, unfortunately. But what we can do is to create that oases on local level, that of course will be compromised, but we're trying to do our best to push boundaries and learn ourselves about that, and pass this baton to the next generation about our experiences.
Sure. I really like that. I like that metaphor you use, the oasis. Like, I tend to think like a garden, and where, like, as a teacher, it's not my job to kind of force learning, but to make learning available. And then, I think, like you said earlier, right? Like, you view a teacher as kind of a servant role to the student, and I really, really agree with that. My job is to make things available, and if they want to pursue it, help them along. But I think the more forceful we are, the more it kind of goes just back to the old paradigm of the teacher says it, so I'm going to follow it, and that's the way it is.
In my view, teacher starts when student ask me a question or ask for help. When there is no asking for help or asking for a question, and the question is really of the interest of the student, not like fake question, of course. It's kind of proto-teaching maybe. Like, for example, I might create provocations, so that will generate some kind of questions from the students. But it's not really teaching, in my view, what's happened before students felt need in me or interest in me.
Don't you think you have some role of create some curiosity of the students to think that they didn't have the chance to expose to?
Sure.
You have to give them first something that oh, it's very interesting to explore this subject because it's very relevant to my life, or not relevant, even not instrumental, just interesting. You as a physics teacher, I sure you expose the students how physics can be interesting to experience the world itself, not just for instrumental to be an engineer. So this first thing, I think this is the first role of being a teacher. The second role is to give them the opportunity to develop themselves, of course. But first of things, I think it's very important thing that you have to make them to be curious about subjects, about worlds, about phenomena.
Yeah, but Amnon, there is a tension between your view and my view, which is good tension.
It's good.
Yeah. Let me tell you, there is a wonderful Russian educator and scholar, and his name is Alexander Labok. And he's raised that issue that actually what we're discussing right now. He's extremely charismatic teacher, extremely charismatic. He's actually, and he said that at some point it became a problem for him. Not because he's unsuccessful, because he's too successful.
Yes, it's control.
He call it we translate it from Russian, fascinating. He can easily fascinate students. But he said by fascinating students, the energy, attention, lifetime limited. And the fact that he fascinates them right now, just because he's teaching math, he wants to fascinate all the students in math. But maybe it's a bad idea to do that. Maybe for some students, it's much better if they're not becoming fascinated in math.
No, but you can make curiosity not but fascinating and not but charismatic. You can make other.
No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about. Is it a good goal? What you're talking about?
Okay.
I'm raising a question about goal, not about how to do that.
Okay.
And in my view, it's progressivism that coming to that. As a physics teacher, I wanted all my students to become exposed to physics, to be this and become curious about physics.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but maybe it's a not good goal to make all my students. It's
to
maybe
reach,
good
to
goal.
reach, but to reach that's their point of view on the world by looking at even with some idea of physics, just to enrich the, we want to enrich their getting around or traveling the world.
Right. Amnon, I want to tell you one very interesting episode from my teaching that connects to that. I had a very interesting class about maybe 7 years ago, and we were discussing similar things because it was educational psychology, and we were exactly discussing the same thing. So one of my students said, imagine who decides what's very important for every student to experience, at least, and maybe then they will be enticed or not. Imagine that today we have math, physics, whatever, science, whatever the school prescribes. But imagine if somebody said, everybody has to learn to play piano. That's some must, and we have to entice every student to at least try to play piano. I would never want to go to such a school. I'm not interested in playing piano.
No, just one octava, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, and that's it.
But some don't want even that.
No, okay.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
So like that reminds me. My father was a fisherman, and he only graduated high school because his mother made him graduate high school. He just wanted to drop out and go fishing. Like when he was, a teenager, he said, "I'm going to be a fisherman. I don't need to learn about Shakespeare. I don't need to learn about this." And in a certain level, the student has a right to decide what they're going to be ignorant about. I mean, it is their education, right? And if they don't want that, I mean, we're kind of almost violating their sense of agency by saying, no, you must have this because I think it's important. So, yeah.
Andrei, what's interesting is there is you probably have heard about this democratic school in UK that's called Summerhill. And
I'm not familiar, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Let me tell you. That's very interesting because it's very relevant what you just said. In that school, it's actually in a few years it will celebrate 100 years of existence. Believe it or not. In that school, it's a boarding school. Students have right not to study anything, or not to study particular things. Nobody forced them to study. So there was in 90s, late 90s, 97, I think, they make a video about their alumni. So it's about students who graduate, most of them like in their 40s, 50s, and 30s, some of them 20s. And it was very interesting about one boy who actually spent all the time in the school learning how to fish. He little bit liked to be pottery as well, but mostly fishing. So he didn't learn how to read and write. So they interview him. What's happened with his life in in 90s, 97, I think. And it's very interesting what's happened. So he liked to travel around the world after he graduated in his 20s. And but in order to cross the country, you need to do the bureaucratic things for visa, for many other things you need to write. His way of doing with that was he was scribble. So people thought that his handwriting is terrible. And of course, the expectation is he come from England. Of course, the English is there. So they basically write for him. So they ask him to narrate, and they write for him, thinking that his handwriting was terrible. Now, it worked for a while, rather well, until he went to Japan. And in Japan, in order to get learn money, he started tutoring business people, Japanese business people, in English, because that's what they wanted, English, and that was his native. And at some point, they asked him how to spell his father's profession or something, because he told about his father, and they say, how to spell that? And he, of course, couldn't spell them, how to spell, because he couldn't write. And he said that he learned how to read and write in, I think, 2 or 3 months. And he said that it was very interesting because at that point, he was very angry at school and his parents who let him go to that school because he needed reading and writing and it was not available for him. On another hand, he said, well, it took me only 3 months to do that. And he said, in a way, I've learned most important thing in the school, that I can learn anything if I need it. And so he was very ambivalent. Even at the end, you can see he's very ambivalent. By the way, he became like who is he right now? Now in 90s, he got PhD in some environmental studies, and he reflecting on that he became like that thanks to his school. He credited his school for becoming who is he became. It was not disabling; it's actually enabling him. That was an interesting story. Nevertheless, he's still ambivalent about that. He said at the end, but I would never let my children to go for that, which is interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, there was a very big change, I think, in the elementary and secondary education, sometimes in the late 60s, 70s, when standardized tests kind of kicked in. Before that, I think teachers were grading, but there were no standardization between the schools and things like that. And because this evaluation was much more organic, let's say, when teachers are grading than mechanized. It naturally created more spaces for unpredictable education, because teachers were also not being completely smart machines, and there was appreciation among teachers about teachable moment, about the possibility for different tests for different students, about grading that's not based on some rubrics, but based on uniqueness of each student. There was much more room for that.
I think it's true for United States, but not, let's say, places like Soviet Union. Soviet Union, we had rather regimented learning. When I came to United States, I actually was, especially elementary school, I was shocked how much it was not based on that. But it depends on the school as well. There are a lot of diverse schools in the United States. Like there are progressive schools, there is much less, there are no grades, for example. Like my son attended elementary school, there was no grades. Some of them were public, both of them were public actually, and there were no grades. By the way, Amnon and Ray, Anna provided a link to that video about this boy, actually not a boy, it's about man, who as a boy did not learn how to read and write. So you can, if you want, you can listen to that. It's like 4 minutes from the bigger video about this alumni of Summerhill.
Right. I also wanted to add that other people in democratic schools, like Greenberg from Sudbury Valley School, wrote that the whole curriculum of math, some of his students learned in like 20 hours, something that usually people take 12 years in school. Yeah. To go to. When they need it, they and they find it important for them. It's the learning goes in completely different ways. So.
And sometimes it's a question of timing. When you're doing, and it's not okay. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use that mention of timing to say I should probably get going. It's pretty late here in Korea.
Oh yeah.
Well, for you it's 1 o'clock almost, right?
Yeah, just about. I gotta wake up in 4 hours. So
okay. Well, we're almost done for 2 hours, so it's, you're excused, and we're all excused.
Right. Well, I appreciate the conversation. It's been really helpful, and like I said, I just wanted to get some tools and some ideas, and I feel like I got that. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amnon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, and I'm sorry you couldn't see me. I will try to fix this things for the next conversation.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys next time.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.